All right, welcome to week 12. Today we're going to be looking at the HTML entities and symbols. We're going to look at counters, iframes, and specificity. So we're going to start with I have here already written down content that we're going to build on. So we'll be looking at the different HTML entities and symbols first. Then we look at the multimedia and iframes, and we look at specificity next. So let's begin. Now, in HTML, certain characters are reserved and cannot be used directly within the code because they could be interpreted as HTML syntax. So, for example, I'm going to write here. So, for example, if we want to have this symbol, the less down symbol, you can see that, let's say I have a p tag here and I want to write text inside the p tag. Now, if I put down the less down symbol, you see the IDE is trying to suggest what possible elements that I could use inside this p tag. Now, if you want to have text that would also have this less than symbol, now there are entities, HTML entities that are used to display this type of symbols because we don't want to have it being read on the browser as an element. So if I save this now and I come over here to refresh my page, you can see the less down symbol, but it's not the right way to do this. So this is where we make use of the HTML entities and symbols. So to display, for example, to display the less than sign, the entities, HTML entities starts with the ampersand sign, which is the and, so the ampersand sign, and follows with the L, and that's L for less than, and T, which ends with a semicolon. So I'm going to save this and refresh the page, and we see that nothing changed because this entity notes that this is a lesser than sign. It tells the browser that we are trying to impute a less than sign. So this is why we have HTML entities and symbols, to avoid or prevent such errors where we write the less than sign and the IDE reads it as an element or an incomplete element and gives an error. So that just these entities are just for us to be able to avoid these problems. So I'm going to save this back, and you see that it's no longer displaying. So let's look at the different possible smileys we can use. So we can use the HTML entities and symbols to create smileys, arrows, mathematical symbols, punctuation marks, and so on. So we're just going to have, let's have some example of these symbols. So I'm going to create a list here. That will hold these symbols. So for our first symbol, we're going to look at the different smileys. Now, to get these symbols, you do not have to memorize them because there are lots of them. So what you do is there are several libraries online. If you don't know any in particular, you could always search through Google. So you could search for HTML entities and symbols. So all you have to do is just get the codes and input them on your HTML page where you want them to display. So let's look at smileys. So I'm going to put this in a bracket. So they always end with semicolon. So let's see what this gives. This is going to be a smiley. So this is a laughing emoji. Now, ordinarily, we don't have a symbol on the keyboard that gives this smiley emoji. So this is a way we can input emojis or smileys in our code. So let's look at another type of smiley before we go to arrows. So these codes I've searched for them before to use them for this exercise. So you could always research whenever you need to use any of them. Now this is a smiling emoji, a blush emoji as well. So I think this is just a few of them. So we're just going to look at arrows. We're going to put this in another list item. I like to leave this as it is. So it always starts with the ampersand sign, and this we want to have a particular arrow. So you see, we have the direction arrow, and normally this is not on our keyboard as well. So this is how we can infuse this type of symbols. Now you can always have these symbols in your web page. Let's say you want to style a page whereby the user sees a direction to click on something, or just maybe a little map or a poster. So you could always use creative means to do this on your web page, just to make your web page more interesting. So there are also more symbols for this. I'll just add one more. So this is just for the direction symbols. So let's look at another symbol. Now this is for mathematical symbols. Now, this symbol, the copy symbol, we usually see on our footers. So this is how you get the copy symbol. You use the ampersand sign and the text copy closed with a semicolon, and it's going to display the copy symbol, the copyright symbol, and it's also a mathematical symbol as well. Let's look at another symbol. We have different symbols. So let me just use this for the final one. RAG. So you see we have another mathematical symbol. So let's go to the next because of time. We're going to look at punctuations. Or punctuation marks. So we have a hyphen. And this should be a dash. That's the longer hyphen. All right, so these are just the different symbols that we can have on the HTML page. So to get these symbols, you can Google HTML entities and symbols. There are several libraries online that you can easily get these symbols for. Also, in the class lesson videos, just below the video, you also get a link to a GitHub repo where you have these entities already written. So you just copy the code for the particular entity or symbol you want. So you specify if it's HTML entities you want or the other types. But for what we're doing here, we're using HTML entities and symbols. So these are just a few of them. Now we want to look at counters. So I've already created these H2 elements which we'll be using to illustrate counters. So CSS counters allow you to use a counting mechanism to number elements on a web page. So they are often used for like custom list numbering or sections. So let's try and include counters to these H2 elements. So I would call this counter. Now, in order to initiate the counter, we always have to make sure that we set this in the body or the parent element. So here, for example, we have the H2 as the element we want to count, and we also have the H2 in a parent element, which is the body element. Now, if we have a div for these H2s, the div would be the parent element. So whatever elements they are that contains this element we are counting is the parent element. So for here, for this particular exercise, we're going to be using the body element as our parent element. So we're going to initiate the counter in the body element. So I'm going to write the syntax, then I'm going to explain everything line by line. And my class counter, which I have created, so first I want to use the pseudo selector for before. I'm going to explain every line step by step. So I'm just going to write the syntax first before explaining. Counter increments. I want it to be the section. And the contents for display will be section. And the counter in parentheses is section. And then the class counter itself would have its own style. I want the font size to be just 2 em and the margin bottom of 10 px. All right, so I'm going to save this, refresh the page for us to see the counter. All right, now what we have here is the counter reset, which is just what we use to initialize the counter. So the counter reset is used to initialize the counter in this example. So counter reset section initializes a counter named section in the body element. So we have reset the counter, and normally we could decide here which name we want the counter to be. So we could say we want it to be chapter, but for this particular exercise or example, I want it to be called section. I just want it to be sections. So it's the name of the counter we use as the value for the reset property. So the counter resets initiates the counter. Now we have specified the class counter in the different H2, which we want to apply the incrementing counter on. So we use the class and a pseudo selector. This means before the counter. That means what the counter. So first we want the counter to auto increment on the sections. So what this means is that it's going to, as much as we create more sections, we create more H2 and include the class to the H2, it's going to auto increment. It's going to auto increase the number from 1, 2, 3. The next one will be section 4. So that's what this counter increments property is for. And we set it to be on the section, that's the now the counter increment increases the value of the counter. So here it's just going to automatically increase each section as much as we want. Maybe we have 5 sections or 5 H2 is going to count as section 1, 2, 3 to 5. So we used it before in the counter before. The pseudo elements to increment the section counter. Now for the contents, this content section is just for the display. Now you can see here that we have the name section. So the content property, the content property is one property, CSS property we use to add content to any elements. For example, we have this pseudo selector, this pseudo element as before. So we use the pseudo element along with the content property to specify a particular addition or a content you want to add to any element. So that's why the selector is called pseudo elements, because we can add more contents. We can modify an element by adding something to it. So here the line says content and specifies what content we want to add to this H2. So you see here the H2 previously was just HTML entities, multimedia iframes, and specificity. So now we've added the content using the counter before. First, we incremented the section to make sure that it has an increasing number as the section goes, and also the content before the H2, which is called section, and we want the counter to be the section. So the name we specified here is what we have also given here as the counter. So we want section, and the counter, the name now to be section, which we've used to reset the counter. And then the colon here is just what comes after the section. So this is basically the display of the counter's value. So similarly, we reset a category counter for each UL we create. For example, for each H2 we create. So now that's for the counters. Let's look at multimedia and iframes. Now an iframe is used to embed another HTML document within the current documents. So we use the attributes. We use attributes inside the iframe elements, and we use attributes like source attributes, which will specify the URL of the page to embed, and also we specify the width and height and define the size of the iframe. So let's look at an example. So we use the elements iframe, which is also known as inline frame as well. And in the source attributes, we're going to specify the web page we want to reveal in this page, want to embed it in this page. So let's use the school website, which is HTTPS. Okay, so this is the school website. So I'm just going to embed it here in the source. And for the width and height, I want the width to be 320 and the height should be 240. So you can specify, adjust it as you please. So let's look at how this displays on the web page. So we have the iframe and the school website displaying inside the iframe. So this is one good way to preview maybe a link. If you want to preview a link to another website on your web page, so you can easily do this and let the user see a mini view of the web page. So this is the school website and you can access it just like this from this little frame. All right, so we're going to go over to specificity. Now, specificity determines which CSS rule is applied when multiple rules could apply to the same element. So we have, let's say we have an element and we want to determine which CSS be applied or should be prioritized. Now it's calculated based on the types of selectors used. So first we have the ID selector, and the ID selector have the a higher specificity than the class selectors. So how do we calculate this? So I'm just going to, though this has been taught in the class lesson, but I'm just going to make use of it to see the importance of using the specificity on elements. So just in case you have maybe a code, you have a web page whereby the codes now are not applying on a particular element because maybe you can't tell which of the styles are conflicting or preventing the style you want to apply to that element from displaying. So this is where specificity is very important. So I'm going to create something here that we're going to illustrate this, and we're going to make use of the important rule. Now the important rule overrides, the important rule is just the exclamation mark in front of a style. It overrides any other declarations regardless of the specificity. So first we're going to look at specificity, see how important they are, and then we're going to manipulate with the important rule to see how we can override certain specificity. So let's create a sample for this. I'm going to have a div. And I'll just put a class here. I'll call it important class. Okay, let's also have an ID. And I'll call this important ID. Okay, let's have a text inside. So we say this text is red and the font size is 20 px due to the designated class. So we're going to do something about this. Okay, just trying to shorten the text so we can see all of it on one page. Now, let's look at how this works. So we have a class called important class, and we also have an ID called important ID. Now, by importance, the specificity level of the ID is higher than the class. Now, you remember when we looked at the different ways to add styles to CSS, add the CSS style to our web page. So we looked at how the inline overrides every other style applied to a particular element on the web page. So we looked at how we use the embedded style to override external styles in the style sheet on the web page, and the external style is the final one where if there is no other overriding embedded or inline style, the external style would take its effect. So we learned already that the inline style is takes more importance when applying styles to an element, next to the embedded style, and as well as the external style last. So for this specificity, we're going to see that the ID has a higher level of importance than the class. So let's look at a CSS style that would illustrate this better. So we're going to create a style for the important class first. And we just want the color to be red, and we want the font size to let's use 30 px. So normally we are going to have this style applied to the element, the div we created that holds this text. So this is the class selector, and we have used it to apply this properties, CSS properties to the text. So let's also use the ID to apply same properties to the text and see which one comes first. So the ID is important ID. The ID we created is important ID. So I'm just going to copy this. But this time, let's change the font to 20 px, and the color should be blue. All right, so let's look at how this is going to display. So you see, we had the class styles before adding the ID styles. So because the ID has more important level than the class, you can see that the styles we have for the ID now, it's overriding the styles we have for the important class. So this is how the specificity level works. So we see that once we have an ID, and IDs are unique, that's why it's called an ID. So the ID has a higher level of specificity compared to the class. That's why it overrides the class selector. Now, how do we manipulate this display, this CSS properties? How do we manipulate them to override even when we have the ID as the important specificity here? So to do that, we use the importance rule, and the importance rule is just by including the exclamation mark with the text importance. So exclamation importance and close. Now, because we use the ID blue, it overrides the red color we had for the class, but we have added the importance rule to the color red. So we want to override this specificity we have already for the ID. We want to make sure that this style is not displaying over the class style, which is for the color. So I save this now, and if I refresh the page, we have the text displaying back to red because we have included the importance rule. So this will come in handy when you start writing lots of lines of codes and you are not able, or you are using a CDN from a CSS framework, whereby maybe you imported some styles and you're not so sure what the styles have, or maybe most of the styles you imported are not displaying the way you want it to. So you could always adjust and make sure to include the importance rule to your own style to override any particular display or style that is imported that you don't have access to. So this is also one way you can do that as well. Now we could go ahead to also add a counter to the list. So this is all we have, but because of we still have more time, we can choose to add a counter to this list, or we add more styles to the list. So let's just explore the little time we have. So let's start with the list. So our list is the UL tag, and this is where we're going to include the counter reset. But first, I want the list tag type to be none. So the marker is going to not going to display. Then we want to include the counter reset, just like we did for the body element. So remember, like I said, the counter reset should always be in the parent element. So we want to count the list, but we are specifying the counter reset in the parent element, which is the UL. So we're going to say counter reset, and this time I want to have them as category, no longer section, since we have different category of entities on the list. So this will be category. Then we can include the contents on the list. So the list item, I'm going to select it like this to make sure it's specified. So we want it before. We're using the pseudo elements before. And in the list, we want to have the counter increments. And we said the counter, we gave the name to be category. And next, we want to have the contents before the counter. And the content here is content here is category. This is what would display before the counting number. Category. And the counter is counting the category. So we can also add more styles to the list, not just only the counter. We could say we want the fonts. Sorry, I haven't closed this line. So we could say the fonts, the font weight, to be bold. All right, I'm going to save this and let's see how it displays on the page. Now you see the counter has counted the list and made sure that the content displays before the counter, and its counter counts the category, the name we have reset the counter to. So you see it counts category 1, category 2, 3, and 4 for each list. So as much as the list item we add, it's going to count it automatically, increasing the number as well. So this is all about HTML entities, counters, iframes, and specificity. So if you have any question, you can ask with the little time we have left. Okay, if there are no questions, you can always reach out to me on the class WhatsApp group. And I wish you success in your assignment. All right, so take care, everyone. Bye.
Okay, bye.